So obviously it's not the best time for Dragon Age, as it seems the series is dead or is at least on a very long rest. EA have moved Bioware to be a single game studio, with all of their focus now being on Mass Effect 5. Many of the staff who worked on Veilguard and the Dragon Age franchise from the very beginning have either been moved on to other parts of EA, left of their own accord, or have just been let go altogether, despite the fact of what is being reported by some journalist sites. All of this was confirmed in a Bioware blog that was released on January 29th. It reads, "Hello everyone, today we are turning towards the future and preparing for the next chapter in Bioware's story. As we announced in August 2023, we are changing how we build games to meet the needs of our upcoming projects and hold ourselves to the highest quality standards. Now that Dragon Age: The Veilguard has been released, a core team at Bioware is developing the next Mass Effect game, under the leadership of veterans from the original trilogy, including Mike Gamble, Preston Watamanek, Derek Watts, Parrish Lee, and others. In keeping with our first commitment to innovating during the development and delivery of Mass Effect, we have challenged ourselves to think deeply about delivering the best experience to our fans. We are taking this opportunity between full development cycles to imagine how we work at Bioware. Given this stage of development, we don't require support from the full studio. We have incredible talent here at Bioware, so we've worked diligently over the past few months to match many of our colleagues with other teams at EA that had open roles that were a strong fit. Today's news will see Bioware become a more agile focused studio that produces unforgettable RPGs. We appreciate your support as we build a new future for Bioware. Gary McKay, General Manager, Bioware." So yeah, that's the statement. And full honestly, all of this reads just as pointless corporate bullshit. It's a statement that says a lot without really saying anything, something that is released to save a company's image after something shady and terrible and underhanded has happened. Which in this case is the Dragon Age team being screwed over by EA once again. They screwed over the Dragon Age team during development and then put the final nail in the coffin after the game was released. This statement also confirms that Bioware is now fully focused on one game at a time, which is now Mass Effect 5. And this is actually a first for the studio, and I think it's a little bit worrying. In the past, Bioware would usually be working on multiple games at a time, usually two, but sometimes more. Typically, one game would be a bit more further along in the development, and that game would be a bit more of a focus for the studio. This game would obviously be receiving more resources like funds and personnel to get the game out the door. But after that game releases, things would change. The team that worked on the game would usually then be split up into two different groups. Some of the team would stay on with their own team, working on post-game content for the game they released like patches and DLC, and possibly even getting in some of the earliest works for their next game, whether it's a sequel or a new IP. While the rest of the team that wouldn't be working on post-game content or the next game would go off and help the other team work on their next game until they were once again needed back on their home team. Bioware has been following this process for the last 2 decades and it's really worked for them. It's allowed them to keep consistency of regular releases every couple of years, staying relevant in the gaming world. It stopped Bioware being like Bethesda or Rockstar, who would only release one game every couple of years. They wouldn't have that drought between releases where they got forgotten about or funds were being worried over. But it also meant there wasn't an over-release of games either. Their games wouldn't be like Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty, where a new one was coming out every year or every 2 years, where it was just the same thing over and over again, but with a different coat of paint. Each game would have a few years post-launch to get some DLC and patches out, and just settle into the gaming community before the studio's next game or the next sequel for that first game came out. I think this has always been a strong selling point for Bioware games. You have enough time to play a game, enjoy it, get multiple playthroughs in before its sequel is on the way, or at least another game by the studio is out for you to play. But EA don't want this, and possibly Bioware don't want it either. I've said EA a lot and I'll probably keep saying EA for the rest of this video, but we don't really know how much of these decisions were made by solely EA or EA and the senior management of Bioware. Probably a bit of both, but I do think most of the blame lies with EA. They want to have Bioware focus on one thing at a time from now on, and at that moment, as I said, it is Mass Effect 5, and it seems that it is only in the early development process at the moment. We're probably not going to be seeing Mass Effect 5 for about 4 or 5 years, if even. There's a good chance it could be longer. And this hypothetical 4 to 5 year gap would have been perfect for post-launch content for Veilguard. They could have worked on DLCs and patches, allowing both Bioware and Dragon Age to stay relevant in the gaming world and keep a steady stream of income coming into Bioware. And that is incredibly important for a company, but I'll get onto that a little bit later on in the video. Even if Veilguard wasn't going to get any DLCs, they could have kept working on patches to make changes and alterations to the game. to address the issues that the game had and make it a better game. Now, I don't want to say that Veilguard is a bad game, because I don't think it is. I like Veilguard, I get enjoyment out of playing it, it's fun for me. But I do recognise its faults. It has them, it's not perfect, but I do like Veilguard. I see the good game that's there and I do enjoy it, but obviously it could be better. After playing Veilguard for a while and starting to see the first few issues crop up and seeing other people online talk about their issues, I thought the studio could take the Baldur's Gate 3 or No Man's Sky approach to Veilguard's post-release life. For those of you who aren't aware, after Baldur's Gate 3 and No Man's Sky came out, a lot of patches were put out for both games. For No Man's Sky, it was to address the issues and shortcomings of the game, and for Baldur's Gate, it was just to give more life to the game. More items were added, more classes were added, dialogue, story beats, a lot of cooked content, and in the case of No Man's Sky, promised content was put back into the game. Baldur's Gate 3 is very different now than it was when it released, and No Man's Sky, that was hated when it was released, is now considered a brilliant game, and people love it. I thought Veilguard could possibly get this treatment. I thought that they could release patches that would make changes and alterations, address the issues raised by the community, and maybe even add in some of the cooked content from its development, or maybe even the concepts around Joplin. Honestly, I was probably being very optimistic at this point. Now, with EA not wanting post-release content for Veilguard, and with Mass Effect 5 being in such early development, it meant there was an entire dev team just sitting there doing nothing. So obviously the only thing EA could think of doing was to let them all go, or at least just get them out of Bioware. They probably thought it was just easier for them to get rid of all of this staff rather than having them work on post-release content or getting a head start on Mass Effect 5. Sorry, actually, easier is the wrong word. Cheaper is the actual word I'm thinking of. It just seems that EA doesn't care about Dragon Age. In my opinion, they've always treated Dragon Age as the lesser of the Bioware IPs. And I think you can see that looking at how the development for the fourth Dragon Age game went, what happened post-release, and the amount of staff that were let go during development and now recently as well. I have to wonder, were they just planning on getting Veilguard out, getting what they could from it, and then just burying the franchise altogether? I wonder if around this time last year, or maybe even the year before, EA just thought, fuck it, let's get this game out. They probably thought that they put enough resources into the game. They probably thought, we've seen people leave, come back and then leave again. We've had to bring in new people, throw in all this money, and nothing seems to be working. So let's just get the game out, get what we can from it, and then cut everything loose. Despite the fact that all the problems that happened with Veilguard's development are EA's fault. We've seen the art book, we've seen the early concepts they had for Joplin, and all of this was lost when they decided to move the game from a single player game to a live service one. Even though Anthem proved that they shouldn't and couldn't do that. But of course they would make all those decisions because they're EA. They just follow where they think the money is. We have perfect proof of that because that's why they bought Bioware. When EA bought Bioware, they didn't really care about anything they were working on. They only wanted Star Wars The Old Republic because they needed something to go up against World of Warcraft. They thought MMOs were going to be this big new thing for gaming that everyone was going to play, so they chased Star Wars The Old Republic because they thought it would be a contender for World of Warcraft. And it just seems that they are constantly chasing that idea, thinking that a big live service, constant stream of income is what they need, and it's what Bioware can give them, when it's clearly not. Even after they moved Veilguard back to being a single player experience, Bioware still had to use all the live service work that they had put into the game for their new single player game, rather than just restarting or going back and trying to save Joplin, which would have been the smarter choice. But no, it was more cost effective to use everything that had been worked on and try and turn that into a single player game. As I said, I really like Veilguard, but you can see that it feels like an MMO live service game without the multiplayer aspects. Odds are, hypothetically, 10 years ago after Trespasser came out, had EA just looked at the industry and looked at the DA fandom and seen what kind of game was wanted and needed, they could have said, yeah, make this Joplin game and we'll leave you to it. Had they just stepped away and let the Dragon Age team do their thing, things would be very, very different. First thing is, this hypothetical Dragon Age Joplin would have came out years ago and probably would have been supported by plenty of DLCs, and the 5th Dragon Age game could probably be somewhere halfway through development by now, if not closer. And odds are, looking at the art book and everything that's been released, it would have been a big success. It would have been a critical and financial success that EA and Bioware would have been very, very happy with. But of course, the people in charge at EA would never have thought of this because they're not gamers. EA isn't like Obsidian or Larian or many other studios that are owned and run by people who love video games. It's run by businessmen. They don't care about the product, they don't care about what they put out, they just care about their return on investment. And their choices to screw over Bioware and the Dragon Age team in the chase of an easy profit is going to come back and hurt Bioware later down the line. As I hypothesized just a minute ago, EA most likely made the choice to get Veilguard out as soon as possible rather than just let it cook for a little bit longer. And they probably made that choice because they saw all the money they were putting into Bioware and they weren't getting any return on it. Rather than looking at the bigger picture and seeing a good product that could come out at the end, they just thought about their paychecks. And odds are, in a couple of years, a few years that will have no new games and no DLC sales for Bioware, someone is going to think the exact same thing. Someone at EA will be looking through spreadsheets at some corporate meeting and is going to say, oh hey, we keep throwing money at this Bioware studio, but they're not bringing anything in. They're not earning us any profit. Why the fuck are we doing this? And odds are they'll just make the decision, fuck it, yeah, let's make some cuts, let's get rid of some staff, let's reduce funding, let's force Mass Effect 5 to come out early before it's ready. Because to me, that's what it looks like happened with Veilguard. When I look at Veilguard, I can see a good game, but I can see the bones of a fantastic game if it just had a bit more time to cook. A lot of the writing for Veilguard feels like it's on its third or fourth draft, while a lot of the writing for Origins 2, Inquisition and other Bioware games feel like it's on their seventh draft. It seems just that EA and possibly management at Bioware stopped caring about writers, and David Gator of all people actually stated this. So I have to think maybe my theory has a little bit of weight, maybe there's some truth behind all this. And then just there's this big fucking insult thrown at the developers, the writers, and us as the fans. This fucking post by Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA, proving that he and most likely a lot of other people at EA have no idea what to do with the development of single player games or with the Dragon Age series. They don't know what to do with a company like Bioware, they don't know what to do with RPGs, they don't know what to do with Dragon Age, and that has me really worried for Mass Effect. Constant mismanagement of this company and this franchise is why so many people left. It's why Mike Laidlaw left, it's why Casey Hudson left, it's why Mark Darrah left, it's why so many great and talented people who made Bioware what it is have gone off somewhere else. These people made Bioware such a success because they focused on story and character driven games, and they were driven away because of the poor management and demands made by EA. And the fact that the head of EA can't see this is such a fucking insult. It's an insult to everyone. Saying that the fandom wanted a live service game is such a fucking insult to the fans, the writers, the developers, everyone. To not have the common sense to realize, yeah, I'm actually the problem here, is ridiculous. It's just proof that EA does not care. It's either proof that EA is just incompetent or they don't care and are only chasing profit. Just after all of this, I can't see EA caring about the staff or its consumers. The fact that he thinks Dragon Age needed live service features and that it was wanted by the fans just proves he has no fucking clue what people in this community actually wanted from a video game. Now look, I'm passionate about all this. I'm obviously pretty pissed off by these statements and what's happening, but I don't want EA to fail. I don't want Bioware to fail. I don't want any company that makes games to fail, because in the end, people, real hard-working people, are going to be affected by this. But seeing shit like this from someone who has no fucking clue brings out that horrible petty side of me. It makes me want to see EA fail because I want someone like this to suffer. But in the end, I know someone like this won't suffer. He won't suffer. EA could go bankrupt tomorrow, it could collapse in on itself. He will be fine. It'll be real, hard-working people that will suffer, that'll lose their jobs, that'll worry about their bills and their homes and how they and their families are going to survive. He and people like him will be fine. Of course, as I'm talking about this and the end of Dragon Age and how EA has screwed them all over, the real victims in all of this are the writers, editors, developers and producers that have been let go. People who have been there for a god-awful amount of time. People who have put their hearts and souls into this franchise and this company. People like Trick and Karen Weeks, John Epler, Mary Kirby, Brian Cormer and Michelle Pham. People who I think, for this series and for Veilguard, really did give it their all. These people have worked on the Dragon Age series from the very beginning and have worked on Mass Effect as well. And I think you can see the good work they put in. You can see their good writing and you can see the good games they've developed. And I can only imagine how tired and angry they must be after being screwed over by EA over and over again, and seeing their colleagues, their friends being let go and wondering when their time would come. They're probably furious that they couldn't deliver the game that the fans wanted, that they wanted. But is Dragon Age dead? I don't know, honestly. It's very hard to answer that question at the moment. If it's not dead, it is gone for a very, very long time. Plenty of dead gaming franchises have come back. Baldur's Gate was gone for over 20 years before Baldur's Gate 3 released. This year, after 21 years, we are getting a sequel to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 1 with Bloodlines 2, a game nobody thought would ever come out. We've also got Doom, Dead Space and Wolfenstein, all series that did end and we thought would never come back, but they did, and they came back well. But will this happen with Dragon Age? I don't know. If it does, there's obviously the chance it could just get moved to another studio. EA still might want to chase the idea of a Dragon Age live service game, so they might just give it to another studio and get them to do it. But this studio won't know the franchise all that well, it won't have all the staff who've worked on it since the very beginning, so obviously they could, and I do want to say could, release a terrible game. When it comes to Bioware making another Dragon Age game, it definitely won't happen until after Mass Effect 5 releases. And as I said, that could take several years depending on how long it takes them to get Mass Effect 5 out, and if it has post-release content. Also, EA might just not want Bioware to work on a Dragon Age game. They might want Bioware to stick with the Mass Effect series or just with other sci-fi games. Hell, they might even want them to try and bring Anthem back. Because usually a sci-fi military style shooter sells a lot better than a fantasy driven game. Also, EA are very unlikely to sell the Dragon Age series. They never really get rid of what they own. They usually just sit on it for a long, long time. Dead Space was gone for 10 years before they decided to release the remake, and it looks like they're not even going to do anything with it now. So odds are they'll just sit on Dragon Age for just as long. EA also probably don't want to sell the game to someone like, let's say hypothetically Larian, who will go up and make a great game that is profitable and well loved and wins a bunch of awards. Because why would they give their competitors something that they can use when they're not even bothered to use it themselves? Odds are if we see another Dragon Age game from Bioware, it will be after Mass Effect 5. And that's only if it sells really, really well. I also just want to jump in here really quickly and give my views on Mass Effect 5. I'm still looking forward to it. I still have high hopes it'll be a good game. I'm still going to cover it here on the channel, and I'm still going to play it when it comes out. But obviously I will be a lot more critical of it, and while my hopes will be high, my expectations will also be equally as high. It's really hard to be excited for a new Mass Effect game when we've seen what's going on with EA, Bioware and Dragon Age. But getting back to Dragon Age, if a new game comes out, even if it's made by Bioware, it just wouldn't be the same. Too many people that have worked on the franchise are gone. People who will never come back, even if they were begged to. And why would they? Why would they return to a company that has screwed them over and made bad decisions on a series that they have put so much of their lives into? A future Dragon Age game could come out, and it could be great. It could be absolutely amazing, but it probably wouldn't feel like a Dragon Age game. Back in 2008, Fallout 3 came out to great success. It was a great game. Plenty of people loved it. Plenty of people bought it. I bought it. I loved it. It won a lot of awards. It's my second favorite Fallout game after Fallout New Vegas, and it's one of my favorite Bethesda games. But not everyone loved it. People who played the previous Fallout games, the isometric Fallout games, weren't big fans of it. Some people felt something was lost when Fallout changed studios and changed its style of gameplay. For those people, it didn't feel like Fallout anymore. And a future Dragon Age game could be amazing, but those die-hard Dragon Age fans might feel the same way as those Fallout fans. A big criticism for Dragon Age the Veilguard is that it doesn't feel like a Dragon Age game. Now, I don't fully agree with this statement, but when people say it, I do see where they're coming from. To me, it still feels like a Dragon Age game, just not one that was properly finished, one that didn't get enough time to cook. It doesn't feel like a Dragon Age game that it could have been or should have been, and this is obviously due to a few key factors. One being the loss of key figures from Bioware throughout the whole 10-year development process, the incredibly long development time, the repeated changes from single player to live service to back to single player again, and most likely, Bioware not being able to restart from the very beginning when they went back to single player for the last time, but having to reuse all the assets they had made for a live service game. And you just can't do that. You can't take the elements of one game and move it into another game. It doesn't work that way. A final big issue for a future Dragon Age game is going to be the community. I don't mean that the community won't play a future Dragon Age game. We probably will. If a Dragon Age game comes out in 5 or 10 years, I'm probably going to play it. But am I going to be as hyped for it as I have been for past games? Am I going to be as dedicated to this series? I don't know. At this moment, I'm really looking forward to Avowed, Exodus, Fable, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, The Witcher 4, and whatever games Larian is working on. These are the role-playing games that I'm really excited for the next couple of years, and I imagine that a lot of Bioware and Dragon Age fans are equally excited for them. I've seen them share their excitement on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. We are very excited for these future games, and odds are we will just move on to these franchises. And if a hypothetical Dragon Age 5 releases alongside a sequel for one of these games, which one are we going to be more excited for? A fifth game in a series that was screwed over by its publisher time and time again, or a potential new game that comes from a series/studio that has only had success? In the end, it seems that EA have killed Dragon Age, either permanently or just for a little while, and if Mass Effect 5 does bad, it could kill Bioware. But even if Dragon Age is officially gone, we the fans will keep it going. We'll play the games, we'll read the books and comics, we'll create our own stories in the tabletop RPG, and we'll draw fan art, read and write fan fiction. To quote Cheryl Shee after she posted on Blue Sky, but Dragon Age isn't dead. There's fic, there's art, there's the connections we made through the games, and because of the games. Technically, EA and Bioware owns the IP, but you can't own an idea, no matter how much they want to. EA isn't dead because it's yours now. We the Dragon Age fans are going to keep this series alive. We're going to play it, we're going to enjoy it, we're going to talk about it, we're going to love it. Even if we never get anything new.